I want to thank everybody for being in attendance today. I'm going to try and move things along crisply. I know there's a lot of ground to cover. I want to apologize to everybody. I should have known that we were using this particular profile picture of me. I do own more than one suit. I would have had one with a different color. But let's get into this. Next slide, please. A big part of what SCC has been constructively engaged on is the adoption of the local coastal programs. Now, for those of you that are unfamiliar with the term, an LCP, Local Coastal Program, is a planning document that vests in the local county or city the legal authority to issue their own coastal development permits. And this is where the issue of sea level rise and what regulations and policies will be adopted is really happening up and down the state of California. The Coastal Commission wants to see certain regulations applied in these different communities, and they're very fond of manage or treat. They also have certain positions that are problematic for a lot of these counties and cities. And accordingly, there's been a certain amount of stalling out with these counties and cities' ability to get these local coastal programs adopted. What will they accept at the local level, and what will the Coastal Commission accept? So we're going to give you a number of examples of the ones that we're working on here. The Coastal Commission approved Santa Cruz County's LCPA in February of this year, but they essentially kicked the can down the road in regards to the safety element on coastal hazards because that's what's most controversial. The County of Santa Cruz wants to include the definition of existing structures, which is including but not limited to structures that existed prior to the implementation of the Coastal Act, which was actually in 1977. They put 1978 in here. And that's hugely important. I don't want to get too wonkish with that, but under the Coastal Act, only existing development is legally entitled to have a shoreline protection device. And so if the Coastal Commission, who's taken a very aggressive position, can roll back the clock decades to 1977, then that would leave a lot of property owners bereft of any legal ability to protect their property. Santa Cruz also has a provision for a shoreline protection exception area, which we're very excited about. And the Coastal Commission on that postponement of the safety element has until October 21st of this year to act on the LCPA safety element, and SCC is very much constructively engaged on that topic. Next slide. So what we are very excited about is for the first time, although there's more in the queue, the county is proposing a shoreline protection exception area. And this runs roughly from Sokol Point down to in front of Jade Street Park. And essentially what the county is saying is they're not willing to allow this part of their community to fall into the sea pursuant to manage or treat. This is an area of bluffs. The bluffs will eventually erode. And so what they're saying in their LCP is that they will work with the local communities through GADs. I'll have a lot more on Geologic Hazard Abatement Districts later on in the presentation to build a community seawall. Next slide. So the in-draft LCPAs are also happening for Marin County, the city of Carlsbad, the city of Santa Cruz, the city, not the county I was just talking about. And these have all stalled out due to similar policy conflicts with the Coastal Commission. This is not something we're just surmising. SCC is in direct contact with all these different jurisdictions. There's adaptation plans in Oceanside and Imperial Beach, which are also facing similar delays. And the updated LCPs and adaptation projects are urgently needed. And I want to loiter on that topic for just one moment, because it's important to be clear that SCC is not an organization which is being obstructionist. We very much support the hard work in regards to adopting planning to address sea level rise. We just think that they need to have more balanced regulations, and we're disturbed that a lot of these LCPs seem to be stalling out as well. Next slide. Marin County has updated their LCPA in effect minus their environmental hazard safety element. In March of this year, they had a Community Development Agency and Coastal Commission staff joint meeting on the guiding principles for the environmental hazards and safety element. And they tell us that the progress with the Coastal Commission continues to be pretty slow. Next slide. Carlsbad submitted their LCPA, just the land use plan, to the Coastal Commission in December of last year. There's two parts to an LCP, by the way. The land use plan is the general policies, And the LIP, which you can see here in the next bullet, is the local implementation plan, which has the very specific development standards, which goes hand in hand with the land use plan. They're holding off on that. And the Coastal Commission review is anticipated to take until June to December of 2023. Important to note that the city of Carlsbad has their definition of existing in the context, referring to structures that existed prior to the Coastal Commission's certification of this policy. So what a lot of these cities are doing, like Carlsbad, is they want to say, forget 1977, we're adopting a new plan, fair is fair, we need to not try to go back in history and unwind people's rights. So the new regulations, which they want to adopt, will come into effect at the time of the certification of the new LCP. Next slide. So the city of Santa Cruz published their draft LCPA in December of last year. And unfortunately, from our perspective, that includes that 1977 date, but we're through our local GAD, we're continuing to work on that. Although that LCPA was developed in consultation with the Coastal Commission staff's now asking for significant changes. So we have met with the senior staff for the city of Santa Cruz. They're working on it. They expect to have their new draft sometime in the fall of this year. And these delays are also causing the West Cliff Drive Adaptation and Management Plan, which was developed with Caltrans and approved by the City Council, to remain unimplemented. So that segues back to my previous comment that not having these plans adopted is injurious to the local communities, the general public, and individual property owners. So getting these LCPs amended properly is a common goal that we all share. Next slide. Oceanside and Imperial Beach both have draft land use plans in process with the Coastal Commission. The publication process for Oceanside has been delayed because the city is waiting on comments from the Coastal Commission. Interestingly, Oceanside is proposing a range of hard and soft adaptation strategies, beach nourishment, sand retention groins. We've also been talking to them about artificial reefs. And the city staff is they're wearing it on their sleeves. They're definitely not afraid to tell us that, and others, that they're having significant disagreements with the Coastal Commission staff on these protection strategies. They do not want to have manage or treat in most cases. And Imperial Beach is looking to publish their draft revisions based on the Coastal Commission comments they have this year sometime. The existing LCPA from 2019 draft did not define the existing development, so we're watching that very closely. Next slide. Carpinteria. This is not a local coastal program amendment, but it's very important while we're talking to the stakeholders. The city of Carpinteria hired consultants and they did a study for basically a dune and shoreline management plan. And that plan was only to enhance dunes along the shoreline, sort of reinforced dunes that would have cobbles and gravel as a core, and then they would put the sand over it, and they would plant it with native vegetation, which is a great thing. SCC had no problem with that. However, it is not a solution, medium range, maybe, but not long range for sea level rise. You cannot put sand on an eroding beach without something to keep it there. It will simply wash away. The SCC staff arranged meetings. I met with them and the mayor of Carpinteria. We provided documentation to the city council that they really needed to take a hard look at offshore reefs, perhaps, to retain the sand. The staff was dismissive of this, suggesting that the artificial reefs would be too difficult to permit and they should be rejected. The city council unanimously rejected the plan. It's pretty clear that the efforts by SCC to educate them in regards to what was actually transpiring here was very, very effective. They sent their staff and their consultants back to take another look at the artificial reefs. And we were very pleased about that because at the end of the day, we do want ultimately there to be the success of these different plans and projects. Next slide. We gave a number of different examples to the city council and to the city staff That, in fact, the Coastal Commission and agencies had approved several reefs in the state of California over the last couple of years, down off of San Onofre for habitat enhancement, also down off of Palos Verdes for habitat enhancement. And then we also gave them this example where in the Port of San Diego, they're installing these reef balls. By the way, what you see here stacked up on the uplands is they're just stacked there before they're being put into the water. But these reef balls are sort of like a hollow concrete. They look almost like a beehive. And they're placed down into the intertidal zone. Studies show that a tremendous amount of biomass grows on these. They love them, 200 to 400 pounds of sea life per year. And they're also effective at breaking the energy from the waves, keeping them from eroding the beach. So it's a win-win. And so there's a $1 million pilot project that's being done down in South Bay of San Diego. So these things are happening. They're moving forward. Next slide. So Manhattan Beach, the City Council has a hearing coming up right around the corner, May 3rd, for their LCPA Coastal Hazards Chapter, which is really where the rubber meets the road or the waves meet the beach, however you care to say it. The policies look pretty good to us. That's one of the things SCC is investing heavily on. We're going through all of these documents. It's a lot of work, policy by policy, regulation by regulation, and we submit comment letters and we constructively engage with the decision makers and the professional planning staff. So Manhattan Beach has some largely favorable policies. They're including a number of options to actually protect their community and their beach, both soft and hard options, living shorelines, previously mentioned dune restoration, beach nourishment, and shoreline protection devices. The policies on the shoreline protection devices reflect 30235 of the Coastal Act, and we will be, SCC will be submitting comments to Manhattan Beach. Next slide. Humboldt County, they've got a draft plan for Humboldt Bay area that ought to be published in the next couple of months. We've been having conversations with them up there. Due to vertical land motion, they're going to have a higher level of sea level rise. Vertical land motion is a fancy way of saying this is a subduction zone, and so the Pacific plate is pulling the North American plate down lower until they have a giant rebound earthquake, and then the shoreline will be higher in a very dramatic and quick fashion. But that's another topic. So we have had conversations with one of the tribal leaders up there, a friend of mine, good man, Ryan Sunderberg, who sat on the Board of Supervisors and used to be a California Coastal Commission, and we are reaching out to have a meeting with the tribal council up there as well, because they definitely have a vested interest in the shoreline on Humboldt County. Next slide. Up in Humboldt County is the city of Arcata. They published their draft LCPA element in February of this year. The strategies that they have include protecting the existing developed areas. They also talk about acquiring vulnerable parcels at fair market value. This is hugely important. One of the established policy positions of the board for SCC is that should there be regulations adopted which will take private property through regulation, that they need to pay for it, that we taxpayers, the government, they need to pay for any land which they take. That's what the Constitution mandates. And we've taken the position that they need to build that right into their local coastal programs if they're going to be implementing manage or treat. Unfortunately, this Arcata's LCPA currently does include the 1977 existing development date, and we're going to continue commenting and collaborating with the city of Arcata. Next slide. There has been a very huge development which has occurred just a couple of weeks ago. The County of Ventura obtained approval from the Coastal Commission for their updated local coastal program, their LCPA amendment. And in that definition of existing development, they had the January 1st, 1977 date in there, but they added or development established after the effective date of the Coastal Act and authorized by an effective coastal development permit or other required local coastal program approval. Now, we're trying not to get too excited about this, but this was done in conjunction and consultation with the Coastal Commission staff. If in fact the Coastal Commission is finally moving in the direction of abandoning this 1977 date, which has basically torpedoed 3 LCP amendments which were pending at the Coastal Commission over the last year and a half. This would be an incredibly positive development. In SCC, we've been talking to the executive director about this topic repeatedly of the Coastal Commission. We've been talking to coastal commissioners themselves. So we're cautiously optimistic that this might signal a new page of compromise. Next slide.
Hey, Don, real quick question. Is there anything special about Ventura, or you think it's just the Coastal Commission's kind of starting to give up?
Well, I have a house in Ventura County in Thousand Oaks, so I think Ventura is very special. Thank you. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure. In fact, it's an important question to ask. But that being said, we didn't make a big deal out of it before the hearing because sometimes if something's looking positive, you don't want to call a lot of attention to it and get people really starting to chew out on it in their deliberations. So we sat pretty quietly, and we're going to fan out and do a little bit of recon on this and find out how this actually came. And again, we're in constant consultation with the staff at the highest level, and I do intend to ask. Next slide. There we go. So let's talk about Geologic Hazard Abatement Districts. We abbreviate it, we call it GADs, and if we're in a bad mood, we call them jihads, but that's different. So this GADs were formed from a legislative ability back in 1979 on the Beverly Act, and GADs were to create independent state-level public agency. They're actually very small, just in the geographic region that they're operating in, to oversee geologic hazard prevention, mitigation, and abatement and control, to deal with broader geologic issues that a number of property owners would have a stake in. Next slide. So one of the quintessential examples of that is Big Rock Mesa. For my friends from Malibu, I will apologize right now. They'll recognize immediately that this picture is not Big Rock Mesa. It's up coast a little bit, so that's on my staff. But the city of Malibu has a Landslide Assessment District 98-1 that is implemented by a GAD that's been there for a number of years. Next slide. And the reason for this is because there's a huge historic landslide with a subdivision that was built on it. It started to move, and a lot of homes were damaged or destroyed. And so the basic gist of the GAD is everybody kicks into it, and you've got water that's coming into this large landslide, and so the GAD has wells, hydroggers, evaporation, and they try and get the water out of the landslide to keep it stable, and it's successful. It works. That's what most of the GADs were for many years. Next slide. I'm just going to keep, very quickly, this just shows the success of it. There's 23 dewatering wells, there's hydroggers, standpipes, incline casings. All of these document on an ongoing basis that the dewatering program is working, and it's got to be implemented correctly. Next slide. So we're excited about the concept of GADs for dealing with sea level rise in these different communities. It's hard to estimate exactly what's going to happen with sea level rise, but if you're doing these things on a case-by-case basis, individual property owners, it's not very effective. But if you can get a community together to address the issue of sea level rise and beach erosion, that's pretty effective and important. And so we're going to use as an example Broad Beach in Malibu again, which formed a GAD with the concurrence of the City Council of Malibu. Next slide. So the Broad Beach GAD, you can see here, it's highlighted in yellow, and it's up coast from Zuma Beach and down below Point Wachusett. Next slide. And the reason for the formation of the GAD, well, this is some flowery language that they have in there, was to create a beach nourishment project for the benefit of everybody. A long-term shoreline protection plan to return Broad Beach to its historical proportions and splendor, flowery language. Next slide. And it is a privately funded project. And the reason for it, you can see this is a Broad Beach, an aerial from 1971 showing it was appropriately named. It was a nice broad beach. Next slide. But due to some changes in the marine canyon, erosion in the marine canyon. The sand supply seems to be getting increasingly limited. And you can see here in 2004, the beaches narrowed up tremendously. Next slide. So there was an emergency permit that was pulled by all the property owners from the Coastal Commission to build a community-wide rock revetment. Next slide. And the GAD was formed to basically restore dunes in people's backyards, but also to do a beach nourishment project in front of this rock revetment. Next slide. So this is a photo simulation of what it is supposed to look like. This is the emergency rock revetment you can see in the inset up above. And when the beach nourishment is done and the dunes are established, this is what it will look like. Now, ironically, I've been a harsh critic of this plan because they do not have any sediment control. They don't have an offshore reef. So I believe the coastal engineering says that this will erode away. But what this does demonstrate is that a GAD can be an effective tool to permit and implement shoreline protection and management projects. Next slide. So this is something which is gaining a lot of traction. Pajaro Dunes Geologic Hazard Abatement District is already in place. It provides funding for improvements and alterations to protect the subject properties from sea level rise. It focuses on prevention, broader range of available remedial measures because everybody's in it together and they can take more of a global holistic approach. And it's autonomous from a lot of local permitting requirements, which is advantageous. And it increases public safety. Next slide. So the stabilization program that GHAD is or did I say GHAD? GAD is an independent public agency in a very real sense. And it serves the dozens of property owners in that area. Next slide. And this shows you a picture of the rock revetment that they have out there. So when you have these community shoreline protection devices like a rock revetment, a GAD can cover a whole range of different options, but that's a different topic in regards to which option is ideal. And that will be done in consultation with the local jurisdictions and the Coastal Commission in the adoption of the LCPs. Next slide. So the Santa Cruz LCPA that I previously spoke about proposes a GAD along that shoreline protection exception area that I showed you the previous slide on. So this is just an area where they, again, do not plan to accept, manage, or treat, and they're going to build a community seawall there, and they're going to do that in conjunction with the local property owners through a GAD. Next slide. And this, again, I've shown you this before, but this is the geographic reach of that shoreline protection area. And this is the one that is under intense negotiations with the Coastal Commission currently. Next slide. So the idea also for this is the seawall that was constructed off of East Cliff Drive, County Park seawalls. One of the things that's very interesting and imaginative in regards to this shoreline seawall exception area is one of the reasons for it is to maintain access. So should the sea levels rise as much as the worst case scenarios predict, they will build the seawalls and they will put vertical access ways on top of them so that the general public can still go to and along the shoreline. Next slide. So the city of Santa Cruz has their vulnerability and adaptation strategy, and they also talk about GADs. Next slide. Coronado, also on the draft adaptation plan, is proposing special assessment districts such as GADs for any number of different solutions, including groins, breakwaters, beach nourishment, and perhaps offshore reefs. Next slide. Running low on time, so next slide. And wow, okay, I was closer to the end that I thought I was. So,
you want to go back to that slide?
Yeah, just to talk about it a little bit more. Again, the special assessment areas that they're talking about, this is really what's critical. And you can see that they've got trigger points. This is something that is also been a position that has been taken by the board of SCC, that tiered responses are the operative terms. And tiered responses are something which the Coastal Commission has been supportive of. And a lot of jurisdictions are seeing this as a bit of a pressure release valve, in the sense that, look, the level of sea level rise that is being required by the Coastal Commission on the analysis of these local coastal programs is for at least 5 foot of sea level rise by the end of the century. We're a little bit taken aback by that number, in the sense that there is, according to the best science, a 1 in 200 chance that there will be that much sea level rise. And this is the accepted science out of the USGS and Cosmos and everything else. So tiered response is a way of turning to all the stakeholders and constituents and saying, look, okay, we'll only do certain things if we document a certain amount of sea level rise. Where we take issue with the approach that the Coastal Commission has wanted to have to date is that their automatic trigger when there is, if there is that documented level of sea level rise, is to go to manage retreat. But what SCC is promoting is for some of these core iconic coastal communities like Coronado and the others that we've been talking about, that what those triggers should implement should be the formation of GADs, and then the creation of beach nourishment projects, perhaps groins, definitely offshore reefs where they're appropriate, and then in worst case scenarios, seawalls and roof abutments. So with that, and you can see here in Coronado that they've got triggers pursuant to the level of sea level rise that may or may not manifest. So with that, I think that's conclusion of my presentation, and I'm available for